Welcome to Expert Profiles Atlanta, where Atlanta's influencers and innovators share strategies for overcoming obstacles and achieving success in business and life. Here's your host, best-selling author and Atlanta influencer, Neil Howe.
Hello and welcome to the show. This is your host, Neil Howe, and today's guest is Jeff Kline. He works with healthcare institutions to help reduce infections by improving hand washing compliance, which is the number one cause of hospital infections today. Jeff has over 25 years of experience, predominantly in the healthcare space, and has been the founder and CEO of HanGenix for the past 4 years. HanGenix is in the process of commercializing a novel patented technology and currently looking for strategic partners and investors. Welcome to the show, Jeff Kline.
Thank you, Neil.
Well, let's get right to it. Tell us a little bit about HanGenix and who it is that you're trying to help.
Yeah, thanks, Neil. So, to set the stage, infections in hospitals have been a problem for a long time. And it's been commonly known that hand washing is one of the most important causes for infections. This goes all the way back to Dr. Semmelweis over 150 years ago, who recognized the importance of hand washing to prevent infections. And it's still been a challenge ever since then. 150 years later, we're still struggling to improve hand washing activities in hospitals. Some of the numbers that are out there, the CDC have reported, on average, about 100,000 people die in hospitals from infections every year, and that number hasn't changed much in the past few decades. And a report came out last year that 400,000 people in nursing homes have died from infections. So it's a staggering problem, and one that there's been a number of efforts have taken place over the past several years, mostly around training and education, awareness campaigns, process improvement, but at the end of the day, the needle has hardly moved. So we've actually developed a technology that helps hospitals monitor hand washing activities. The way it's currently done now is this concept called a secret shopper. So it's basically an observer who's a healthcare practitioner who discreetly observes healthcare workers throughout the course of the day and makes the determination, hey, did they wash their hands when they're supposed to or not? And that is a problem, the way that they're doing it right now. There's a number of reasons why that is a problem. Number one, through observation, they're sampling less than 0.5% of the hand washing activity. So it's a very statistical, insignificant number at the end of the day. Number two, people tend to know who the secret shopper is. So there's kind of a Hawthorne effect, if you will. So everybody is on their best behavior when they know they're being watched. So whatever numbers they generate tend to be inflated or skewed higher. Number three is there's no specificity to this data. So at the end of the day, they get a number that says we're 90% compliant, but there's no information around who, when, where, and why hands aren't being washed in the hospital. And then finally, they're really monitoring the wrong thing. So what happens at the doorway, which is where they typically stand outside of the room, what happens at the doorway is irrelevant. What really matters is that moment of truth when the healthcare worker is going to come in contact with that patient. Have they just washed at that moment before contacting the patient? So a big problem out there that hospitals have been struggling to address for a long time.
Yeah, I find that really amazing. In today's day and age, we know that the hand washing is extremely important, and to have between the nursing homes and the hospitals, that's 500,000 people die. Well, what about the others that didn't die and just got sick? I mean, how
Correct.
that?
Yeah, I mean, U.S. hospitals, they're reporting, it depends what the numbers you look at, but we've seen as much as 2 million people getting infections in hospitals. And then if you look at, the CDC reported that hospitals on average are less than 50% compliant in washing when they're supposed to. We've seen numbers a lot lower than that from our work. And, We think a lot of that is just an awareness. I think a lot of people don't realize all the opportunities when they need to wash their hands. There's training. People are busy. They forget. So, we start with the assumption that everybody intends to do the right thing. I don't think anybody wakes up and says, I'm not going to wash my hands today. But things happen, especially in ICUs. There's so many things going on. Nurses and doctors are responsible for so many more things today than they were 10, 20, 30 years ago. And there's, fewer people doing more work. So the ratios of, nurses to patients, it's getting stretched. So this is a perfect opportunity when technology can really help supplement some of the activity that's going on right now.
But this is a problem that hasn't changed. Like you said, it hasn't moved the needle in, 30, 40 years. Is this just about developing habits?
Yeah, we believe it's a combination of things. So, our technology, we don't think our technology alone is a silver bullet. We believe that technology has to be married with training and education. It has to be married with process improvement. So people have to really think about how they're managing their activities on a daily basis, and then change management. So you're right. We're asking people to change their behavior, and that's not easy. I mean, especially people who have done things the same way for a long time. So it really requires a very thoughtful and methodical approach going forward, where technology is an integral part of it, but it's part of a larger bundle.
Well, it's definitely a problem that needs addressed and needs fixed. And if it hasn't had a fix for 30, 40 years, it needs something like this to come along. So tell us a little bit about HanGenix and how that is going to solve the problem.
Yeah, so this technology was actually developed at Mass General up in Boston in their healthcare incubator up there. So we've been licensing the technology from Mass General for the last 3 years. And they went about trying to address this by looking at what are all the technologies that are already out there that could potentially be used to address this. So they looked at things like RFID, so radio frequency identification, that's often used for asset tracking. Or they've looked at infrared, GPS. There's a number of kind of tracking technologies that are out there. But at the end of the day, they realized that all those modalities had limitations. The goal of this technology was to actually create a protection zone around the patient's bed. And the reason for that is that there are guidelines that really specify when folks are supposed to wash their hands in the hospital or a healthcare environment. The World Health Organization and the CDC have come out with guidelines. And when you boil those guidelines down, about 80 to 90% of the hand washing opportunities are when you and I would think they would be. It's immediately before or immediately after contact with the patient, or something in the patient's environment that's either within reach or attached to them, because that's all assumed to be contaminated. So we went about developing a technology that could actually determine at those moments, and that publication was called My 5 Moments of Hand Hygiene. But the goal was to make sure we could help enforce those guidelines and determine at that moment, at those particular moments, is the person's hands clean or have they been washed prior and after the contact with the patient. So the technology they ultimately landed on is using sonar or ultrasound technology. And to give you something to compare it to, when you're in your car and you're backing up and you get near something, and how it starts to beep when you have a camera in the back, similar type of sound wave technology. And what's unique about sonar is it's directional. So you can actually point it in a specific direction, where some of the other ones kind of radiate out in 360 degrees and they're much harder to contain. And ultrasound reflects off walls where other technologies go through walls. So really, if your goal is to create this very defined zone around the patient's bed, this sonar or ultrasound technology is the only technology we've seen that can actually effectively do that. So we use a transmitter that we put behind the patient's bed to create this protection zone. And then at all the soap and alcohol dispensers, there is another transmitter that is triggered by the vibration of the soap being dispensed. So whether it's a manual or automatic pump, and it doesn't matter the manufacturer, when somebody dispenses soap, they essentially get a token on their badge. So that's the third component, is we have a badge that can actually be married with an existing hospital ID badge, so folks don't have to wear different components, and they always have to have their picture ID with them in the hospital.
Right.
So on that badge essentially is an ultrasound receiver, and all of that person's individual hand hygiene data is stored. So the way the workflow would go is somebody would wash their hands. They would get a token on their badge that says, my hands are clean for X number of seconds. And we can adjust that based on kind of the layout of the room or what the protocols are for that particular patient. But let's say it's 15 seconds or 30 seconds. When the healthcare worker then approaches the patient and enters that protection zone, their badge is quickly scanned and say, has this person just washed their hands in the last 15 seconds? And if the answer is no, then the badge actually beeps. It gives them an audible reminder that says, hey, you need to go back and wash your hands again, or you need to wash them for the first time. And then the same thing when they leave that patient area, you're now assumed to be contaminated. So with a certain amount of time, you need to decontaminate or wash your hands again prior to leaving that patient area altogether. Now, what's interesting is that throughout the course of one visit, somebody may have to wash their hands 3, 4, 5 times. And the reason being, there are so many contaminated sites within the room. So let's say you go to the patient and then you go over to the keyboard or the computer on wheels and you start typing patient information in there. Well, you've just contaminated yourself again. So if you come back to the patient, you have to wash your hands again. Same thing with the supply cabinet. I mean, we could rattle off dozens of surfaces that are contaminated. What's also interesting about our technology is we can actually create multiple zones, protection zones within the patient room. So if there's 2 beds or 4 beds in a particular room, which we've done studies in all those environments, or if it's an emergency room where there's an open bay and there's a dozen beds or stretchers lined up, we can create individual zones to protect each of those areas. And we can even create microzones. So if somebody wants to monitor when somebody is touching a keyboard, or if somebody is accessing a medication cabinet and we only want specifically credentialed people to have that access, we can monitor that. So it's really cool. And we're just kind of scratching the surface of all the capabilities of this technology going forward.
Well, it certainly sounds very cool. And to have that kind of technology, really make a difference in the hand washing world and save some patients from getting infected, it would certainly be a wonderful thing to implement in these hospitals and nursing homes. So have you done any studies on how that has actually worked in certain situations?
Yeah, so we've had 5 successful pilots, and in fact, we've got a peer-reviewed, published clinical study that validates the accuracy of our technology, because that's number one. It's gotta be accurate and measure what you are expecting it to measure. And then through these pilots, in each of them, we've seen at least a 50% improvement in hand washing rates after the technology was implemented. And the way we've done these pilots is we would identify a unit within the hospital, whether it's an ICU or a med-surg unit. And our technology is very easy to install. So we can do a unit within a couple of hours because it's all battery powered. And we don't even really need to access the hospital's internet or network. Basically, what we do is our technology, all the information is collected on the badges. And then at the nursing station, there's basically a data transfer device that will pull the data from the badge and then port it to the cloud. And then we can begin to push that data out to various stakeholders in a variety of different reports or dashboards or whoever they want that information. But we will come in and install a unit, and then we will distribute the badges, but we'll turn off the audible reminder, and we'll kind of disappear for a while with the goal of capturing an accurate baseline. Because as you'd imagine, there's usually a pretty big discrepancy between the rates that they're reporting through the secret shopper technique and then the more objective rates that we're able to report through this technology.
Right.
So we find usually it's around 40 to 50% compliant, consistent with what the CDC has seen. And then we'll capture that for about a week. We get a baseline, and then we will sit down with the management team and we'll report the data and we'll go through it. And then we will turn the audible reminders on. And it's amazing. Within a day, you see the rates go up 50, 60, 70% from the baseline. And there's still even more room to improve from there. I mean, again, this is just putting on the audible reminder, you see the impact. And then when you start to layer in the other things that we had talked about around training and education and process improvement and change management, then we believe we can begin to see rates getting in the 90, 95% range, which is much more acceptable than where they are today.
Definitely. So it's about developing those habits right away and having some training to go behind that to increase and to instill that. Now, how long have you done these tests for, and have you seen any drop-off once people get used to it?
So we've done them anywhere from 30 to 60 days. So in that duration, we have not seen a drop-off. In what we're doing, we're actually partnering with some hospitals now where we're gonna do a study that's going to be a year in length. So we've got a pretty large health system up in the Midwest that we're partnering with right now. So in addition to measuring what's going to happen from a compliance standpoint, we're also going to look what's going to happen to infection rates during that time period. Now, that's the goal at the end of the day. Now, what I think we all recognize is we can't prove causality between our technology and reduce infection, because hand washing, although it's the most important, it's not the only impact on infection. But we can certainly show a correlation. And there's been a number of studies that have shown the relationship between improved compliance and reduced infections. So that's our goal. And we're continuing to look for strategic partners from a hospital standpoint who are interested in doing those kind of studies. And then again, working collaboratively to develop what are these new processes that need to look like? What's the change management plan going forward? And then begin to explore some of the other capabilities of this technology. So through the development of these zones and throughout the hospital, we can track much more than hand washing. So we can, hospitals are very big on Lean Six Sigma right now and trying to improve efficiency and workflow. So we can track, how people are moving through the hospital, how much time people are spending with patients, which is another very important thing. Hospitals, part of their reimbursement from Medicare, in addition to being impacted by infection rates and readmission rates, there's also a patient satisfaction element to that. And there have been a number of studies that have shown a positive correlation between how much time the physician spends bedside with the patient and what their patient satisfaction scores are. So we can track things like that. So very exciting where we view the history and the roadmap of this technology going forward.
Definitely. It's got more than one application, which always makes for a good technology. So talk to me about the cost. What is this going to cost the hospitals? And, are there any drawbacks to them taking action and doing this?
So we're still refining what the ultimate cost is going to be, but the way that we will charge for this technology is going to be like a software implementation. So rather than there being a huge capital investment for hospitals, we know how constrained hospitals are for capital right now. So essentially, we'd charge them a monthly service fee based on the number of beds that they want monitored for right now. So it'll be a certain number of dollars per month per bed. And it doesn't have to be an all or nothing proposition. They may want to start with their higher risk areas like the ICU or oncology or pediatrics, areas where infections can be really catastrophic to both the patient and financially to the hospital. So implement it there. And then over time, once the technology's proven it out and they've seen reductions in infections and they've seen the process improve, then we can begin to expand it out to the larger part of the hospital. So we want to make sure that this is very affordable. And when you think about all the direct and indirect costs around infections, so not only the cost to treat the patient, which by the way is no longer being reimbursed from insurance companies, any cost after an infection has been determined that the hospital caused, the hospital has to pay for all the treatment beyond that. Then there's penalties from Medicare and Medicaid right now, as I mentioned earlier, around infection rates and readmission rates and patient sat. There are lawsuits around infections all the time. Infection data is publicly available information. So if you or I are going to get our knee replaced and we wanted to determine which hospital we would go to have the procedure, I would pick the safer hospital that had the lower infection rates. So, as hospitals are becoming very competitive, now we're talking about impacting the top line, not just avoiding the cost. 5-10 years ago, infections were actually profitable for hospitals, which is hard to believe. And that has changed dramatically right now. So when you factor all that in, we've done a number of ROI models for hospitals that are looking at this technology, and we see the payback within the first year of implementation. And then, we bring in the hardware and we upgrade it for them and maintain it them as a part of their monthly service fee. So they don't have to worry about, what do I do if this breaks, or what happens if the next version comes out? That's all a part of the contract with us.
Excellent. That sounds good. Now, what areas of the hospital really need this the most, and which ones have the worst compliance so far when it comes to washing hands?
Yeah, and it seems to be the IC, the intensive care units for the most part. And that, again, there's a real intensity of activity that's taking place there. And again, there's so many things going on that I just think, and there's so many opportunities in which hands have to be washed throughout the course of one particular visit, that it tends to be that those are where some of the rates are the lowest and also the most impactful. So an infection to somebody who's already immunocompromised can really trigger larger complications down the road, sometimes ending in mortality, unfortunately. So those are the areas that I think make the most sense to begin with this technology at this point.
Yeah, well, like you said, these people in the ICUs are, they've got a weak immune system, and if infection takes place there, they're going to have it bad. So, yeah, to get people to actually wash their hands and get into the habit of being clean and free from infections and disease is going to make quite a bit of difference, I would imagine.
Yeah, I think the big thing right now is folks have been flying blind. Hospitals have been flying blind for the most part, and we can provide them with some real data now that can help them focus their efforts where they need to be. In the past, it'd just be, okay, everybody's got to take hand washing training now because we think our rates are low. Now we can pinpoint, it may be this particular person who hasn't been trained effectively, or, has got too much going on. It could be this particular room. We could find out that, hey, the soap dispensers are located at a place that's very hard to get to, therefore causing challenges or lower rates in that particular room versus the other ones. We've seen studies that show at the end of people's shifts, compliance rates go down. There must be a fatigue factor. So are there things that we could do throughout the course of the shift, provide additional reminders or some incentives or something to keep those rates? So now we've got so much more granular information that's so valuable to the hospital right now. They can really focus their efforts on where it needs to be.
Well, I'm reading one of your brochures right now, and you say that a 1% increase in hand hygiene compliance could be worth up to almost $40,000 for the hospital.
That's right. That was a study that was done at Duke University Medical Center a number of years ago. So yeah, it's that impactful. So we could do the numbers pretty quickly, right? If they're 50% compliant and they go to 90% compliance, a 40% improvement, that's $1.6 million based on that estimation alone every year. That's recurring savings right now. So,
and they don't have to have as many lawsuits with infections, and they don't have to pay for treatment of infections as well.
All right, and that doesn't include the penalties for Medicare and Medicaid. So yes, so we think that that's kind of the low end of what the potential financial impact. And then, I mean, at the end of the day, this, there's a huge societal reason to do this, and it's part of, myself and my co-founder have both lost family members to hospital infections. So this is very personal, and I think that almost everybody knows somebody or they themselves have been impacted by infections in hospitals. And so many of these are preventable. And, this is really a mission of our company right now, is we believe we can save tens of thousands of lives. And it's not just in the US. I mean, what's amazing is the US has even better rates than some other parts of the world. So we have global aspirations of making a huge societal impact.
So what are you looking for right now, Jeff? I know you're just kind of, you've been at it for 4 years, but you're still just getting started, really, and trying to get, broadly across the nation and the world. What are you looking for, or what does the timeline look like for HanGenix?
Yeah, you're right. I mean, as in part of my intro, I've been doing this for 4 years, and the first 3 years was really around understanding the problem that we're addressing, understanding what's already in place, the competitive landscape. And then it was about really refining and getting the technology right. So, we've made some improvements over the years to the point where we really are excited about what we have, and it's been tested, and we've gotten some great feedback from the folks who have used it so far. So there's really 3 things that we're looking for, 3 types of partnerships. So we're continuing to look for strategic partners from a provider, so from a hospital or hospital system standpoint, or even insurance companies would be great partners with us right now. Obviously, insurance companies bear a lot of the financial brunt for infections as well within hospitals. So we're looking for a strategic partner to help us continue to develop and validate this technology going forward. That's number 1. Number 2 is we would love to find a commercial partner or 2 to go to market. So as we begin to commercialize, we'd love to work with some folks who already have a footprint, already have relationships, are already calling on the types of healthcare workers where this technology resonates. So a partner to go to market with would be great. And then obviously investors, as we're looking to commercialize this and scale the business, we're looking to raise additional capital in order to support those efforts and to continue to innovate the product. So all 3 of those would be terrific right now.
Well, I can imagine people, when they hear this story and realize the difference that you can make by implementing this technology in hospitals and assisted living places across the country and the world, they're going to want to get involved, because ultimately you are saving lives.
That's right.
There's no better way to help than actually saving people's lives, and this technology certainly can do that. So what is the best way for them to get in touch with you, Jeff, if they want to reach out, or just anybody that wants a little bit more information about this?
Yeah, so there's a few different ways. So our website is www.HanGenixSolutions.com. So that's HANGENIX solutions with an S.com. And then my email address, you could email me directly. So it's Jeff, Jeff.Kline, KLINE, again, at HanGenixSolutions.com. Or if somebody wants to call me directly on my cell phone, that would be fine as well. My phone number is 770-315-6320. So I really appreciate the time, Neil.
Well, I really hope that you get those calls and you get those strategic partners and investors and get the word out about this, because, it's very important. And to make any kind of difference, from a 50%, there's a lot of room for improvement there. So wish you all the best. Jeff Kline from HanGenix. Thank you very much for being my guest on Expert Profiles Atlanta today.
Thank you, Neil.
And to our listening audience, if you like what you hear, hit that like button and share, and we'll see you next time on the show.
Thank you for listening to Expert Profiles Atlanta with Neil Howe. To learn more about the resources in the show or to listen to past episodes, visit expertprofilesatlanta.com.